Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 18.1 launch week and our final webinar of the week, What's New in Dashboards, Reporting and Analytics, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher and DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall. In this session, learn how we're reshaping our data analytics product line and how you can deliver more in less time with 18.1. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Julian and Paul.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Launch week, it's always a lot of fun. Julian, you've been on just about every presentation this week.
I have been on every single presentation this week, so this is my fourth webinar de la semaine, as they say in France. And welcome everybody. What's new in version 18.1 for dashboards, reporting and analytics? Let's see what's what.
It's interesting because this particular presentation is one of the toughest to try and cram everything into because we cover every platform. And that's one of the really exciting things with dashboards and reporting.
Absolutely. We do not shy away from a particular platform on this particular webinar. So lots of new demos being fired up as you watch, basically.
So I'll cover reporting. Julian, you can have dashboards and analytics. Before we get into that, we have a couple of frequently asked questions. Number one, when will it be available? And unlike the other day, we've now got a big drum roll.
Yes, it was uploaded this morning, Pacific time. So it is there now. I would say go and download it and install it and all the rest of it, but you'll miss this webinar. So wait until we're finished, and I'm downloading at the moment, so I want full speed.
There you go. So where do you get it? Well, head on over to the new sexy looking devexpress.com website, top right hand corner, my downloads. If you're not already logged in, you can log in with your DevExpress account. If you've forgotten your password, you can ask for a reset at that point too. Once you've logged in, you will see, and there we are, look at that, 18.1.3 released yesterday.
Yesterday in Brisbane, maybe, but today, pretty much everywhere else in the world.
There you go. Click on the download link, either the executable or the zip file, and run the install. Can I run it side by side? Absolutely. And in fact, I highly recommend that you keep your current version, which should be 17.2, I would hope, running, install version 18 alongside, and then you can switch between the versions as you see fit for your projects. How do you upgrade your projects? I'm glad you asked. Basically, run the component project converter, select the project file you want, or folder or group of folders, and hit upgrade all. I recommend using the create backup file option. Of course, you should also have a copy in your source control. Now, the project converter only affects the project file and the resource file. So we do not modify your source code whatsoever. We don't update properties inside designers or anything like that. We simply switch the assembly numbers or versions around. So if it's a ASP project, we're going to update web config. If it's a WinForms project, we're going to update your C# or CS project file or VB project file. It's a non-destructive process, and you can switch between 18, 17, etc. if you want to move backwards and forwards. And of course, always check for breaking changes. There's a link in the demo center to make sure that there's nothing affecting your project. Enough of that, let's get on and have a look at what's new in reporting. Well, we're going to start with a couple of things that are visual, non-visual. I'm going to go to the demo center and I'm going to fire up the reporting demos. The first thing off the rank is something that's called a cached report source component. And effectively, it's been introduced to manage really large reports. And by large reports, I'm talking hundreds, thousands, tens of thousand page reports. And yes, there are a lot of people that generate that sort of volume of reporting with the tools. Now, of course, one of the biggest problems when you start thinking of pages of that size is how we would generally create the document model and allow you to then stream or view it, etc. So with the case report source component, we switch to a physical storage, basically. So instead of using memory to try and manage everything, you can use a file storage, so your hard drive, or database storage. And what that means is that you're only limited by the amount of storage you've got available. End result, you can generate some really, really big reports in amazing speed or amazing times and without a lot of overhead. I'm going to go to the large quantity of data. We can see that my report parameters are set at 1 million rows. And down the bottom here, we can see that my page count is increasing at a fairly decent speed. Now, when Julian and I were preparing for this, we ran some tests with Task Manager or Resource Monitor running. I've got to say the memory consumption barely shifted. My hard drive was obviously working a little bit harder, but thinking about generating high volume of reports, what we're up to now, 1,500 pages. So that's not a bad sized document. And I'll hit stop. And here we've got the report with nearly 2,000 pages. And you can see as I just scroll through here, the viewer is performing fantastically, and I'm not losing that resource that we would have had previously with memory consumption. So a 2,000 page document, and of course the viewer is simply loading from that cache area as required. So a great feature to kick off with. The next thing I want to talk about is our support for .NET Core. Now this is in CTP, but it is something that is a lot of fun to play with. So what we have here, if we go to the start page, we can say that we want to create a new project from the template gallery. I'm going to hit the button and choose my DevExpress version 18.1 gallery. Up comes up the page, and from here I'm going to choose .NET Core, and we can see that we've got a reporting application straight for .NET Core and also an Angular version. Select this, give it your project name, and hit create project. You're going to get the little wizard asking what you want to include inside your project. So whether you want to have a designer page, the viewer page, and if you want the project wizard to actually create the report storage. Now what I've done is actually created this earlier because it does take a couple of minutes to pick up some of the dependencies and things. But what you can see we've got is an SP or a .NET Core application. And when I run it up, we will have the designer page and we'll have a viewer, all that can be run obviously on any server that supports the runtime. So not just IIS. Click on Report Designer, and we're going to see the beautiful web report designer. Of course, if I click on document viewer, we get the HTML5 document viewer shown as well. So that's really nice for those people that wanted or have asked for .NET Core support. Now the other cool thing, I've got a straightforward, let's just cancel this one. I've got another ASP.NET Core project here. Now this is just a vanilla one that was installed by using the Microsoft template gallery. What we've now done is add the ability for you to add in a DevExpress .NET standard report file at this level. You'll see it here in the list. And if I add this to my project, what it's actually going to do is automatically install through NuGet the DevExpress reporting core library. All I need to do now is double click on the report file and it will invoke a modal editor that you can set up your report with. So obviously, if you're familiar with our UI or report designer, it's basically the same thing, but you're not locked into anything but the .NET Core reporting library to be available. Other things that apply to all of the platforms, the pivot grid now if you have got a pivot grid, so a crosstab report or a pivot grid that spans more than one page horizontally, you can actually set a new option to print your row headings on every page. And there's been some designer enhancements across the whole of the product range. So you can now resize tables, column and rows in a proportional fashion. So think of it in terms, if you've used Microsoft Word's table designer, where you can just drag and the rows and columns resize at the same level. You've got two new ways of adjusting label size to match label content. You've got the ability to fit an image, whether it be an image, rich text, or any other control into a parent container. So it's going to be positioned correctly within the container. We've given you the ability to provide line widths now in pixels. So for the XR line object, you've got a line width property. It's changed from an int32 to a single. And the smart copy and paste operations. So if you actually copy from one particular report and paste them into a new container or band, the original positions are going to be preserved. And that works in the Visual Studio Designer as well as the WinForms end user designer. The final thing that applies to every platform is the extra table, or the XR table control. If you're using hidden columns, you've now got a new option for having the empty space. Sorry, there's Google asking me questions. You will actually have it, so it will fill the empty space, and you can choose the distribution model for that. Let's jump over and take a look at some changes to the MVC reporting. So again, I'll bring up my demo application. A couple of things have changed for ASP.NET MVC. First thing we're going to look at is a new query builder. It's interesting, sometimes GoToWebinar really does take over the processor on a machine running these types of demos. I'm going to jump straight into the Web Report Designer. I'm going to set full screen and just get rid of the menu there. So the Query Designer, or the new Query Builder, come along to Data Sources. I'm going to choose an existing data source, and I'm going to click on Edit. Before I bring that one up, I'll just mention the fact that the data source wizard here has now got syntax highlighting for your select statements, which makes it a lot easier to spot things when you're looking at large field lists, etc. So we can really see the alias on the field name come through. But if I run the query builder, you can see that I can drag in tables. Don't right click. Julian told me off earlier for that. I can right click tables, I can drag between fields and generate relationships. But what's also really nice is I've got the ability to preview my data. Now, again, my screen size is not making that very easy, but we've got a preview results option there. So let me jump back. I'll just skip out of this one and bring up the customer one. Or products. Let's run Query Builder. Now the demo gods have been a little bit mean to me today. I've had some problems with a couple of my background engines causing all sorts of grief, so please bear with me. But here we can see we've got the data preview showing exactly what can be done. You can see you've got the ability to maintain your relationships, and you can drag and drop tables nice and easily in the Query Builder. Another feature that I want to mention is the HTML5 reporting control now has full support for web farm and web gardens. Now, if you're not quite sure what a web farm or why that's relevant, we'll have Julian give you a quick explanation.
Oh yeah, web farms. Sorry, yes, you're right. Essentially, when you have your web application up in the cloud and you have, hundreds of thousands of users, you tend to want to split that application so that it runs on many different servers, and that generally happens automatically. And the big problem with that kind of process is if you're storing state on the first server and your user gets switched to another server, that state is no longer available. So we have to do some, quote, clever stuff, unquote, to make sure that we're saving the state in a way that if the user is switched from server to server, he doesn't lose where he is or things like that. So that's web farms. It requires some extra functionality, basically. And web gardens? Web gardens is when you're on the same server but using a different application pool. Again, it's a state problem.
Now, while Julian was just going through that, I actually snuck along and modified one of the field names just to show you this next feature, and that is binding validation. I've got an option up here on the toolbar, and if I click this, it's going to show me using this little red indicator rather than the black one, that this field that's been bound to is actually invalid. And if I click on that, I also get the validation marker here as well. But it's nice, especially if you've got a large complex report, you've got a quick visual way of making sure that either the underlying data structure hasn't changed or that somebody hasn't just come along and broken your report. Next thing I would like to show you is the expression editor. Now, we've all been in the situation where we want to create something and we have to go to Google, Stack Overflow, reach for the manuals, are they still a thing? And find out how you actually implement it. Well, now inside the expression editor, if I start typing, and I can use the sum again, but you'll see we've got IntelliSense, we've got the detail on the right-hand side, which also shows us what's happening. So we've got function descriptions and hints, and of course, the syntax editing and highlighting. So you'll see now it knows that the only thing that's possible, not the only thing, but I might want a field or a function. So quite a nice feature as well. There's also some other enhancements, such as you can now rename a data source component. The XR table control can span across multiple rows. And inside the HTML5 document viewer, clicking on a table of contents item will automatically select the corresponding item in the document map. Let's jump over to WinForms for a second. So back to my reporting, and I'll fire up, which is probably already running, my WinForms demo. A couple of changes for WinForms. One thing I do want to call out is the fact that this is now using the new Fluent Design form. You can see that on the left-hand side, this panel, it's got that semi-transparent Microsoft-esque view, and that's working because I'm now running the latest build of the Windows Spring Creators Update, or the April update, whatever they're calling it, that can now be used with our new Fluent Design form. The other thing is the SVG icons that have been implemented. But probably more importantly, if I switch to the designer, we've introduced contextual tabs. So again, inspired by Microsoft Office. But now if I click on an actual element, you'll see that tabs appear based on the functionality of what's available. So if I click on this table, we're going to see that we've got table tools. So instead of the UI being cluttered, information is exposed contextually as required. The other thing with the designer is the ability for your end users to be able to easily select styles. Now, at the moment, depending on, again, where you are as to what styles become available, but you've got a pop-out gallery allowing things to be set. Probably one of my most favorite features for the designer on this particular release is this next feature, and that is favorites. Here I've got my traditional property grid, and of course, if you're a Visual Studio user or you're an Extra Reports user, you'll know that it can be a little bit cumbersome to start scrolling through all of these items, whether you do it, have it grouped or categorized, or just A to Z, which is usually my favorite view. It can be a real pain trying to find some of those features. So what the team have done is allow you to actually edit your favorite properties. And for each section of a report, so the report itself, it could be that I only want to see style sheet and a couple of other options. In my detail block, I only will really work with fonts and text alignments and a couple of other minor features. But for each of the elements in your report, you can create a favorites. And then just by toggling this option here, you can say, just show my favorites. So if I'm in the report, if I'm in the detail block, if I come down to a line or a group, you'll see that you're removing, again, a lot of that clutter of things that would just get in the way. So I absolutely love that feature and would love to see it implemented in Visual Studio. Next, we have the page setup dialog, and we now support custom sizes. So bring up the size and jump to C. I can now specify a complete custom paper size. Whizzing through these, Julian. The expression editor, I should bring my properties window back up, has got some new features added to it. I'll turn my favorites off. And with the expression editor, we've added the intelligent code completion, the ability to see column and function tooltips, as well as the validation error indicator. And we're seeing that implemented across a lot of our controls now and different platforms. Now, I wasn't actually aware of this next feature. I wasn't aware that it was an issue until I was going through all the documentation, but duplex printing. Up until 18.1, you had to write code to handle duplex printing. But now, if I go and bring up the preview and bring up a print window, you will see that there is now the ability, and obviously it's based on the print engine that you select, to print on both sides. You can simply choose whether you want to be flipped on the long edge or the short edge, click, and when you print, you will now be able to see the document as a back-to-back or side-to-side print, which is pretty cool. There's some things with WPF reporting that I wanted to cover, but that's one of the unfortunate areas that is broken on my demo machine as of an hour ago. So I've got a couple of quick screenshots to share with you. As well as I've already shown inside WinForms, the WPF end user report designer has the contextual tabs. It's got the ribbon style gallery. It's got the page setup dialog for custom paper. It's got the favorites functionality that I've shown you. And then there's a couple of other little things that I want to point out. It now has a Office inspired property grid. So that's what you're seeing on screen at the moment. So the properties grid is more in tune with what you'd see in something like Microsoft Office. And then the next big item is the ability to add a print preview to your backstage. So this replicates the print screen style functionality that you'd see inside something like Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word. And you can now just incorporate this new control into a backstage view if you're using the ribbon layout with a lot of ease. WPF also obviously supports the duplex printing. And the last item there is the document scaling. So version 18.1 introduces document scaling for the data grid, the tree list, covers the pivot grid and chart controls, allowing you to scale down an oversized control to fit the page or scale up a control to print it across multiple sheets of paper. And I think, Julian, I can hand over to you for dashboards.
Okie dokie. Let's just quickly change the presenter here to myself. And I'm going to show, let's say this one. So you should be seeing my screen by now, and it's exactly the same as Paul just had. So dashboards and analytics for version 18.1. As we said right at the beginning, I'm going to be covering all the platforms, WinForms, WPF, and the web. Here's a quick synopsis of what I'll be talking about right now. The WPF dashboard viewer, web dashboard, we're talking about the mobile layout and various other enhancements. WinForms dashboard, various enhancements there, and the same with the Office file APIs. So without further ado, let me just drag over my dashboard demo. I hasten to add, I am not using the actual released version. I'm using a slightly older one from a couple of days ago. So be warned, yours may look a little different, maybe not, I don't know. Anyway, the very first item I'd like to present is the new dashboard viewer control for WPF. We'd released a CTP version, a community technical preview version in version 17.2 with a proviso that, yeah, some features were missing, some functionality didn't work, but it was ready to play around and try out. So I'm glad to announce that the dashboard viewer for WPF is and has been fully released in version 18.1. Let me just drag it over here and maximize it so you can see it. Now, much like its WinForms counterpart, the DevExpress WPF dashboard viewer can be used to display a dashboard based upon an existing XML file or a dashboard generated within Visual Studio using the dashboard designer. The dashboard viewer for WPF gives you the ability to load data asynchronously, so your end user is not waiting for something to happen. You can actually start using the dashboard, work with the dashboard, while some time-consuming operation is executed on the server. We use WPF templates and our WPF styling and theming, and I've selected Office 2016 White for this particular demo. In essence, it's the same as the WinForms dashboard viewer, but it's for WPF. And like all of our dashboard products, it is part of DevExpress Universal. And let's take a quick tour through some of the examples for the viewer. Basically, as I just did earlier on, I opened up the demo center, selected dashboard, and then WPF, as you saw. The initial example here is a sales overview. We have several panels here. We have a nice little line chart type thing, a grid with some information, some gauges, and a range control, so I can select different ranges. And as I do so, the other parts of the dashboard, the other panels, update to show that information for that particular range. Now, let me click on a state within the grid. I'm going to choose Colorado because that's where I am. And the data for the other panels is filtered according to that particular state. Now, notice also the icons on each panel. The standard one is the export drop-down. You can export to the panel to PDF, image, or Excel, or if you wanted to, you can do exactly the same for the dashboard as a whole, export to PDF, an image, or to Excel. Now, since I clicked on a state here, notice that this particular icon, the clear filter button, is now active, so I can click on that to see the data for every single state down here again. A new feature you may have noticed throughout our dashboard product is the maximize button. I can click on it, and basically that panel maximizes to the dashboard window, and I can click on it again to restore it to its original panel size. Again, because it's a dashboard view, I can alter the sizing of everything if I really wanted to, and it's a dashboard viewer. It's for WPF and it's there. Next one I want to look at is the financial dashboard, just because I can select individual items here. I can view the stock prices for that particular stock. I can click on these things and see different information as we go through. I can also, on this particular example, set some dashboard parameters and a date range in essence. And again, everything will be updated once I do select that. Quick EU trade overview example here. This one is interesting for essentially two things. One is the tree map view. I can hover over individual items within the tree map view and see the title of that particular section plus the value. The other thing over here is the ability to select filter, essentially, filter individual countries and individual products. So if I select chemical products for the European Union, here we are. So again, all the other panels update because of that. Another cool one, and remember, we're still in WPF, is the revenue by industry here. I'm going to show a map of the US, and you can zoom in on the map and zoom out on the map and all the rest of it. The interesting thing is this panel is actually showing aggregated data by state. We're supposed to be showing the revenue by city, but if there are too many data points within a particular area of the map, we aggregate them so that you're only seeing one or two instead of a bazillion different items. So if I go over to Colorado here, where I am, and all the rest of it, I can zoom in and zoom in to see individual points within that particular state. Talking of filters, which I was earlier on, here we have a filter, but it has a search facility. So I can do compute hardware and just select that, and bingo, we update the map. So that's the WPF dashboard viewer. Next, I'm going to switch platforms and we're going to the web. I warn you now, I am actually using this on my local machine. I am not using it directly on our server, again, because I'm using a different version of the product rather than the one that's up there from this morning. The first thing I want to show you is the most important part, I think, is our mobile dashboard viewer. So here we are, we're on sales overview, by the way. So let's click over to the mobile side. And I'd just like to point out, although there's a QR code here, remember I'm on my local host, so this is not going to work if you wanted to scan it. But if you're doing this on the web and on our demo site on our website, it will actually go to the relevant page for this particular demo. Anyway, we've done a lot of work with regard to mobile dashboards. It is not an easy proposition. So there's a lot of design and UX type, user experience type work here with how to actually display a dashboard on a mobile device with limited screen estate. It's hard, essentially. The panels are still here, so we're looking at sales overview. The panels are all still here. We can touch them essentially to view the entire thing, so the entire panel full size, if you like. So let me click on the sales by state panel, which is a grid, if you remember from last time. So we basically have a kind of very restricted grid, and I can click on a state. Notice my filter comes back, or remove filter comes back, and I can go back and view, say, this particular panel, which is showing product category by for just Colorado, because I clicked on Colorado. So I can go back over here and clear and see all information for all states, and the gauges, if you like, become a little simpler. We have to try and reduce the size of the gauge. If we try to show the actual round gauge, it would take up too much space. So we got this more kind of a range or an indicator on some kind of range. So let's go back, and we can view other dashboards. So if I wanted to jump over to, I don't know, the where are we? I had one, here we are, revenue by industry. I can show you, obviously, lots of aggregation going on, and, you know, to zoom in and de-aggregate all that data, I can still do that. And here we are, Colorado, and we can zoom in and zoom in and zoom in. So mobile dashboard viewer. It's not a dashboard editor, it's the dashboard viewer. Now let's jump over to the desktop again, and inside the designer, let's jump to that. Go back to the designer, we get a new panel over here. I'm sure you've all seen this before. We've added a new create calculated fields option inside the binding menu. So we're in the designer, I'm going to click on the grid, and of course we get all these nice little icons to say, let's do some stuff with this. So we'll click on the bindings icon, and I'm going to add a column, a new calculated column. So I'll click on that, and notice this new icon here, F plus for add a function or add a calculation. I'm going to click on it, and we're going to add a calculated field. So I'm going to call my calculated field diff, because I'm going to do the difference between the sales. Oh, look, yeah, that's kind of cool. Sales minus what sales target. I can, if I wanted to, select them down here. I'm showing all the fields at the moment. If I make a mistake, oh yeah, that's a field, isn't it? It seems to like it. If I take it out, notice that we have verification that the formula actually works. So let's go back to sales target here and delete that and click on that. Yep. And I'm going to save that. So I've got a new column called diff. I'm doing this rather simple calculation. I do have a whole bunch of functions I can, you know, select and play around with and all the rest of it if I wanted to. So we've now got the diff column appearing in the binding list, and the diff column appears in the grid itself. And notice it's positive if the arrow is up and negative if the arrow is down, because I managed to do it the right way around, unlike our rehearsal. So there we go. Calculated fields from the binding menu. Let's close that, and we're pretty much done with that. A couple of new features with this release. You can, with the web dashboard, you can now use it in ASP.NET Core applications. Web dashboard for ASP.NET Core supports both the full .NET framework as well as the more modern .NET Core runtime, and with the latter allows you to host your applications on both Mac and Linux. We've also added SQL syntax highlighting to our dashboards query viewer. Paul showed it for reporting. It's the same kind of thing for dashboards. So that's the web. Let's now jump over, I don't think I'll save, jump over to WinForms. So with WinForms, WinForms is obviously our, if you like, oldest dashboard. Wrote it a while ago. Let's grow this full size. Same dashboard, same definition, essentially, as we've seen before. Now, our dashboard, the filter editor for the dashboard, has a textual pane with autocomplete and syntax highlighting. So let me jump over to the editor. Here it is. I keep on having to drag it from another screen. I apologize for that. And here we are, and I right click here and I can edit the filter, and I get this new filter editor, and I can say, okay, state begins with N, and we'll delete that, and press enter on that. So what happens now is if I apply this, boom, I just get states which begin with the letter N. So the pane here displays that syntax errors and allows end users to use functions and so on and so forth when building these criteria. So there's an awful lot of extra stuff that we can do with the filter editor. Also, with regard to the WinForms dashboard, you can add your own command buttons or drop-down lists to the dashboard title and panel captions to incorporate your own functionality. And to improve rendering on high DPI screens, we've replaced all our raster icons with SVG icons, and I cheer within the DevExpress WinForms dashboard viewer. So if I go back to the viewer now, and he says, oh, okay, yeah. The icons are now SVG. Last but not least, the release includes a number of performance improvements for data processing calculation related pieces. The multi-core data processing engine now supports things like top-end mode, calculations with aggregate functions, and sorting by summary. Now I've shown off the WinForms dashboard. Let's do a quick discussion about our Office File API. With this release for PDF documents, both our PDF viewer for WinForms and PDF document API support DirectX rendering. Gives a performance boost for common usage scenarios, things like high quality text rendering, improved text anti-aliasing, and so on and so forth. We also support blend modes, all the blend modes and all text rendering modes for PDFs. Spreadsheet document API. With this release, you can load, print, and export to PDF worksheets that contain shapes. I showed you the shapes a couple of days ago for the WinForms and WPF. What's new? Well, you can export those to PDF. Spreadsheet document API can now print and export worksheets with charts that contain series points with custom colors. Automatic document format identification. The spreadsheet can work out what a document is by looking at it rather than just by looking at the extension, file extension. We automatically identify the document format. We talked a bit about this for the WinForms and WPF webinar as well. And finally, the Spreadsheet Document API now includes its own print method and no longer requires the extra printing library to print documents. You can print an entire workbook or sheets using default or custom printer settings. That goes over to our word processing document API as well. We will, there is a automatic document format identification with Word documents essentially, and also the document API, Word document API now supports its own print method again. With the word processing document API, we have support for checkbox form fields. You can create checkbox form fields, change their state and size, and print and export them to PDF or HTML. And we've enhanced both the layout and formatting accuracy when printing and exporting documents to WPF. And that is it for this part of the webinar. We've seen lots of new things with dashboards and our Office File APIs. And so let's bring Paul back in. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Julian.
How's the questions been?
Thick and fast. But before we head to questions, one thing that I neglected to say, so I've been slapped over the wrist already, was the query filter control that I was showing before was obviously part of the reporting suite prior to version 18.1. But what's happened in this release is the fact that that is now, as it's the MVC version I'm talking about, that is a control in its own right. So you can now implement that with your MVC application to provide query filters for things like the data grid, tree list, etc. So it wasn't so much that it's a new control inside just reporting, but the team have extracted that coolness and made it available.
Ah, okay, brilliant.
There's a number of questions which are really support related. So please, if there's things such as something's not working quite the way you think it should, head over to the support center and raise a ticket, and the guys will be more than welcome or more than happy to get to you with that stuff. A couple of other quick things to mention. Julian, the version Julian's running right now, whilst it says, states that it's 18.1.2, it was a slightly later internal version to what was on the public download, the public beta. So yes, there would have been some buttons, some demos that weren't featured on the public beta that are now included. And in fact, the release version, which was released today, 18.1.3, has got some more stuff as well. So that's sometimes a little difficult to sort of get your head around, that we do have different data that we play with.
Indeed. The issue being, of course, that it was too late for me to update my machine and do this rehearsal and webinar at the same time. It's c'est la vie, as they say.
So let me run through a couple of the questions that come in. So one question was, can I create a new dashboard project using old school web forms? Absolutely. I'm actually with you there, Carlos. I think sometimes web forms is quicker and maybe dirtier, but to get up and running instead of implementing MVC, and I'll get shot for that one. Do we support OLAP tubular? The dashboards themselves don't officially support sort of the SSS tabular model cubes, but our query engine that's been used can be used with a multidimensional model, requesting data from the cube, and will run without an issue in most cases. Again, always, if you're unsure or want help, support center. We've got people from all over the world, Julian, so hello to all those from Colombia, Greece, Dubai. What have we got here? The question was, should you remove 17.x after or before you update? Don't remove it at all, Richard. Just leave it on there for a while. I'm a big fan of having projects that I need to migrate a little bit later because of the complexity of them. You do not have to remove the other one. What else do we have? Does our reporting tool support the RDL format? No, it doesn't support RDL. We use a banded report concept, which is different from the SSRS concept, but we actually think ours is much better anyway. So couple of support style ones here. There's lots to go through. The chart quality is very bad when exporting a report to PDF. Will this be solved in this version? Well, Sebastian, it's actually comes down to the property type on your XR chart object. Please make sure it's set to meta file, so it will be rendered as a vector object rather than a raster, which would be a big difference in the output. But again, if you've got any concerns with that, the team would be more than happy to deal with that on a support ticket. Lots of people asking.
Remember, vector good, raster bad. Vector good, raster bad.
Yes, Mr. SVG. The question was, is 18.1 the first version to support .NET Core 2.0 reporting? Yes, and it's currently in CTP. So doesn't mean that we're going to be completely bug or error free, but of course, people are asking for it. We provide the CTP to get that feedback. When are we planning to support NoSQL instead of SQL? So there's the NoSQL DB instead of SQL. Pierre's running CapsDB. Now, at the moment, we don't have any estimates that we can give you, but you can always connect using the object data source. And if you've got specific requirements, hit the team up on the support center. They will work through things with you. What else have we got here?
Also, I'd have to say that if you're using some kind of database engine, say CouchDB or MongoDB or something like that we don't actually support, the more people we hear from saying, I really need this, in other words, the more feedback we get, the more we will prioritize that particular feature, that particular enhancement. It goes across the board, it really does. The more we hear from our customers about what they need and why they need it, the more chance we have of actually putting it in for the next major release or the release after that or whatever it happens to be. So just a thought.
Just a thought. And of course, the object data source is fantastic because you can take data from anywhere, create your object model as long as it implements the IEnumerable or list interface, then you can pass data around. What have we got here? When was the async loading added, and is that in WinForms 2? So the asynchronous data loading is new to version 18.1, and at the moment there's no immediate plans to support it in WinForms. Boo, says everybody. What else have we got here? Do we need any special specification or coding for the mobile dashboard, or will it adjust auto-magically? So the mobile layout for the web dashboard is enabled by default. So just make sure that your HTML is mobile friendly. Will the web dashboard designer work on a DevExpress application? Yes. The dashboard designer for DevExpress can work on the same HTML page because it's based on the DevExpress controls. What else have we got? One here, we love the dashboard application. We use it a lot. Thank you for developing such an amazing application. A recommendation, multiple pages that use the same filtering and drill down. So a feature request, and we love feature requests. So the response from one of the team is that multi-page dashboards is on our roadmap. Ooh, exciting.
Well, awesome. Thank you all. And like they mentioned, the dev team will get to all the questions, and Paul will do a blog post with the answers. So look out for that.
Yay!
Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will also be available on our DevExpress YouTube channel. All of our previous launch webinars are also on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch those if you missed them, or re-watch them if you were with us. You also get a follow-up email with links to all of our launch webinar recordings sometime next week. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.